Assalamu alaikum everyone, this is Dr. Mubashir Nadeem. I hope all my students are okay. That's good if your answer is yes. Well, I hope you remember what we did in the last session. Do you remember? Okay, you can recall. But I want you to recall that what I asked you to do before you start joining the third session. Yes, exactly. I presented before you a slide with the request that you have to read about certain things which were given there. And I expect that all of you must have tried to consult the material, whatever is with you, so that you may be able to understand what we are going to talk today. Yes, exactly. I still remember that I had a talk with you when I said that to please try to connect session 1 with session 2 with the third session 3 with the fourth session, right? Since all these sessions are primarily a chain and we cannot miss any link because we have to connect phonetics with phonology. Same is the case with all these sessions. So it is my request that you need to do is to understand one session with the other by connecting them. All right, so our today's session is session number 3. That means we are in the second week. And I hope when you're going to start this session, at that time you have to recall what we did in session number 2. Okay? The topics which we need to talk about today are acoustic phonetics, articulatory phonetics, auditory phonetics, and functional phonetics. I hope you remember that I had a talk in session number 2, and of course before that I tried to explain, not in detail, but I said that we'll be explaining and we'll try to understand each and every branch of phonetics in detail. You must try to recall certain things because it is not possible without connecting the previous session proceedings. We can understand today's session. So it is my humble request, which I all the time make to all my students, that when you sit to listen to me or maybe some other instructors, always remember that you have to understand and recall what we've done already, because it is not possible that we can proceed further without understanding what we've done before. All right, so today we'll be talking about the branches of phonetics, which are acoustic phonetics, articulatory phonetics, auditory phonetics, and of course we'll be talking about functional phonetics. This is what I was talking about. Before starting the session, I made a request that all right, let's recall that what in fact try to understand when we were leaving the second session. I left you during the second session by presenting this particular slide, and I said, all right, please start thinking about these. If it is possible, you can read about them, no problem. And I expect that all of you must have tried to read something about these which are in front of you. Now, I talked about the articulatory phonetics, I talked about acoustic phonetics, and yes, perceptual phonetics. So these 3 branches are very important to understand because these are the concepts behind the understanding of phonetics. Briefly talking about articulatory phonetics, this one line is presented before you, and that is at the bottom. It analyzes how words are produced in the speech organ. That means articulatory phonetics talks about the production of the speech sounds through speech organs. Yes, definitely, it is very much associated with the acoustic phonetics and perceptual phonetics. Then the second area is acoustic phonetics, that talks about physically analyzes speech as vibrations of air. So what does it talk about? It physically analyzes speech as vibrations of air. As I told you earlier, remember what happens, there is a medium required for sound waves. And what is the medium we have? Definitely air is the medium. Okay, and then the perceptual phonetics, which analyzes how speech is perceived. Can you recall one line when we try to understand that phonetics primarily studies what? Human speech sounds, definitely speech sounds, but regarding their production, their transmission, and their perception. Is it clear? Now, if you read that line and if you try to understand that definition, you can now make a framework what we have talked about so far. My dear, very honorable students, we can sum up the entire phonetics through this slide. Now you can understand, I have already shown you this slide during my second session, and now I'm presenting before you again. Remember, when we say phonetics, that means we are talking about is acoustics, is articulatory world, is auditory, and then functional use. So that means there are 4 branches, but the first 3 branches are very important. I am not saying that the 4th one is not important, but to understand phonetics, it is imperative on the learner to understand what is acoustic phonetics, and then the articulatory phonetics, and the 3rd one is the auditory, because we must be knowing what is the mechanism involved in the production of speech sound, and then what are the speech sounds, and then how they are perceived. Okay? While generating understanding about phonetics and its branches, the point we all must remember is that the phonic medium can be studied from 4 points of view. Phonic medium can be studied from 4 points of view. And the first point of view is articulatory, second is acoustic, the third is auditory, and 4th is functional. What I want to tell you is that there are 4 points of view available so far as the understanding regarding phonetics is concerned. Of course, these are branches of phonetics, but there are 4 points of view, remember. The first one tells us something about the articulatory, how to produce a sound. Then the acoustic, what is the kind of sound or what kind of sound we produce. And then the auditory, how do we perceive that sound? First, produced, what is produced, and what is perceived. And finally, what's the functional use of everything regarding phonetics and definitely speech sounds. Having said that, we may consider the branches of phonetics according to these aspects. Whatever we have talked about, right? In the light of the discussion we have made so far, we may consider the branches of phonetics according to these aspects. Number 1 is articulatory phonetics is the study of the way the vocal organs are used to produce speech sound. Articulation means we are bound to understand the vocal organs, how they are used. What is the function of all those vocal organs inside our mouth? Because what happens whenever the speech is produced, we are only concerned with the speech sound. The sound we perceive, we understand, we receive. But there is a complete world behind that. There is a complete mechanism behind the production of one speech sound even. I'm not talking about the connected speech, the way I'm talking to you now. Even the production of one speech sound, what happens? This particular branch of phonetics, which is articulatory, primarily it is the study of what? The way vocal organs are used. It is very important to understand this point at this juncture, because in the coming days we are going to describe, we are going to classify each and every speech sound. So that's why we must remember what's the role of vocal organs. What is the role of the speech organs? That's very important to understand. And then the second aspect is that acoustic phonetics is the study of the physical properties of speech sound. The first one is what? How the vocal organs are used to produce speech sounds. Physiology is involved. But over here, we are concerned with the properties of speech sounds. The properties of speech sounds. Okay? Well, the third aspect is the auditory phonetics. May I read for you? Auditory phonetics is the study of the way people perceive speech sound. I hope you remember during the first session I presented before you one simple slide. One speaker and of course one listener. And at the same time I told you while talking about that slide, I said please do not take it only two pictures or two persons. One is speaking, the other one is listening. No, this is the entire world. For example, this time I'm talking to you, I'm producing sounds. Now you are the receiver, but you have to perceive sounds. It is possible. It is possible that sometimes I am producing sounds, but you are not able to receive the way you want to receive them. That's why it's very important to understand phonetics and the concepts behind it. The third aspect is very important. We cannot separate, all right, the first two are very important, this is not important. No, each and every aspect is very important. On its own, it plays a wonderful role. The first, the production of speech sounds. How the speech sounds are produced. And then, what are the sounds we produce? And third, what are the sounds we perceive? And on these three branches of phonetics, remember, the longest established and until recently the most highly developed is articulatory phonetics. That means whatever we talk about, primarily we should be concerned with the articulatory phonetics. In other words, what I want to tell you is that the most important area, I'm not saying the others are not important, but the most important is that what is articulatory phonetics? Once you know that what are the speech organs, what kind of role each and every speech organ or vocal organs play. I mean, each one plays its role. So we have to understand articulatory first of all. What is the articulation or the procedures behind articulation? So these aspects, in fact, what happens, these branches are equally important. But what has been done more is the articulatory phonetics, that we have to understand that. Without understanding articulatory phonetics, because it talks about the role of all speech organs or vocal organs, right? In this context, it is also very important to understand that phoneticians are also interested in the way in which sound phenomena function in a particular language. In other words, they study the abstract side of the sounds of language. So that means there is the abstract side of the sounds of language, whatever the language. I'm not talking about English or any specific language. And then the branch of phonetics concerned with the study of the functional aspect of speech sound is called phonology. I hope you understand now. The functional aspect of the speech sounds, how those all speech sounds which are produced by us, what is their functional nature, how do we use them, what is the use in connected speech, remember, that is called phonology. So that's why time and again I wanted to refer to English language, although I should not have referred to English language, I was not particularizing, but to make you understand I had to give reference to some language, and that's why I thought it very appropriate to talk about English, because we are going to talk about phonology of English very soon. So the fourth aspect is very important, that is the functional. As the term itself tells us, it is self-explanatory, right? It is connected with linguistic, that how do we use those speech sounds in a particular language. And when we talk about, for example, phonology of English, so we are talking about the sounds of English language. Now let's try to understand all these branches of phonetics separately. I have talked much about, of course, generally that what kind of role each and every branch of phonetics plays when we are producing, when we are transmitting, what we are receiving the sounds. But now it's time to understand all these branches separately. For example, let's talk about acoustic phonetics first. May I read for you that acoustic phonetics is the study of the physical properties of speech sound, such as frequency and amplitude in their transmission. Now, two words are bold here, frequency and amplitude. I read for you again. It is possible that you already know these two words, but I think we have to try to understand, not only today, but of course in the coming days as well, that acoustic phonetics is the study of the physical properties of speech sounds, such as frequency and amplitude in their transmission. Now transmission becomes important to understand, because we have to understand what is the frequency and what is the amplitude of the speech sounds. Whether it is definitely connected speech, because we are talking, as I am talking to you. So you have to determine what is the frequency and what is the amplitude. For example, let me tell you what is frequency. Frequency is the occurrences of a repeating event per unit. Frequency is the occurrences of a repeating event per unit. And amplitude is the maximum extent of a vibration. Amplitude is the maximum extent of a vibration. Remember, in order to really understand phonetics and phonology, it is extremely helpful, if not even essential, to understand how sounds are physically produced and transmitted from speaker to hearer. This is what I was trying to emphasize, and that's why I refer to slide number 1, of course, in which you saw one speaker and a listener or hearer. It's very important. As a student of phonetics and phonology, I think it is very important to understand, because we have to analyze, so far as speech sounds are concerned, that physically how they're produced, because naturally when I'm talking for some audience. We do not generate speech, we do not generate speech sounds without any audience, because we must have some sort of audience, whether you are talking virtually. Yes, you are listening to me online, but remember, even face-to-face interaction, that is rather more important. Why is that important? Because at that time we can understand the gestures. This time, if I am making gestures, for instance, you are not seeing my gestures. And when I'm talking to you, what is my posture? What is my posture of sitting? But what happens when we are interacting with people in face-to-face situation? So what happens? We can understand even the smiles, even certain frowns, sometimes certain gestures. But here it is very important. For example, you are listening to me. As I told you, I try my level best to be simple, so that we may understand each other. There are certain things you need to understand now, and definitely when you develop understanding, then you can just read extra material or sport material. So that's why we need to understand that how these speech sounds are physically produced, and then how they are transmitted. Do you remember when I requested you to pronounce two words? One was phonetics, the other was phonology. And I said most of the people, I'm not saying everyone, most of the people, they call phonetics as phonetics. And it is possible some of the people, instead of saying this word as phonology, they call it phonology. But as a student of this particular course, remember, we need to learn that how the speech sounds are produced. We have to understand the physical nature of these speech sounds. And then, for example, I have to determine whether I am speaking whatever the sound, I am producing whatever the sound, whether it is according to the rules or the concepts behind phonetics or not. Then it is possible that I will be able to communicate properly whatever the message is. because you are my listener, you are my hearer. You have to determine what kind of sounds I am producing at this time. For example, look at the physical reality behind speech sounds and how their characteristics can be measured and explained. You can explain and you can measure. If I am using fur sound, for example, but I am not touching upper teeth, lower lip, that means I am not producing this fur sound properly. Without taking a pause, you will be saying, no, it is absolutely wrong, wrongly produced. So that's why it is imperative, not only for me, but for every speaker, that when we, for example, if I call myself the student of phonetics and phonology, at that time I must be knowing the concepts behind phonetics. And especially when I talk about the concepts, remember the biggest concept what we have is the articulation. But to understand articulation, definitely I have to rely on acoustic phonetics. Then I'll be able to measure the auditory phonetics, or the world of auditory phonetics. If the sound I'm producing, and of course in the coming days when I'll be giving demonstration on all the speech sound and then all the consonants, all the vowels of English, definitely you need to know whether they are produced or they have been produced by the instructor correctly or incorrectly. It is possible there are certain pronunciations of certain words which we do not know. But what we can do is that at least we can improve. We can improve. As I told you that English is not our first language. It is a foreign language for us, and of course in some cases it's a second language. That's why. And then there's one big factor I told you. Do you remember when I said, all right, okay, different spelling, different pronunciation? For example, take up the word fish, F-I-S-H. I mean, simple word. It has got 4 letters. Well, what happens? We have got 3 phonemes. 3 sounds are there. F, I, sh. So that's why we don't have to get ourselves confused. We should be knowing that how we are producing these sounds. So that, in other words, what I'm trying to say is that we must consider the point of view of our listener or hearer. It's very important. As I told you, yes, exactly, virtually we are on. You are listening to me. But what we can do is that virtually even to guarantee each other. For example, when I try to ask you to do some sort of activity, that means there is a reason behind that. And the reason is that you need to do something by yourself so that you may be able to understand what I'm trying to convey to you. All right? Let's put it in another way. Now try to understand what I'm saying. First, please read these lines. Speech sounds are vibrations that travel through a medium. Do you remember I made a request that try to understand there is a medium required. Speech sounds are vibrations that travel through a medium, usually air. By displacing the molecules of this medium, pushing them against one another so that they move each other along in the direction of the hearer or hearers. Now we have to understand that speech sounds are vibrations. Vibrations. When I'm in the classroom, I have got 40 plus audience, right? But for example, I am standing in front of the rostrum and my direction is only to the students who are sitting in front of me and not the other ones. What happens? That means they are lost. It is because of this reason you might have seen that most of the teachers, they do not stand in front of the rostrum all the time. Let me tell you, that is called lockstep technique, and it is not liked by most of the trainers, most of the teachers. Standing in front of the rostrum all the time means that the instructor or the teacher, whatsoever you call him or her, is directing his hair. Speech sounds only to one part of the class. But what happens? Because of the understandability of certain students or the audience, you know, what happens? Learning does not occur. I'm not saying absolutely learning does not occur, but how to measure it, how to assess it, it's very important. So depending upon the speech production, whosoever the instructor, when he or she is in the classroom, maybe school, college or the university, what is the requirement? That makes no difference that what kind of language he or she speaks. It is Urdu, English, Punjabi, Pashto, Sindhi, Balochi, whatever the language one speaks in the classroom. Unless until that medium is followed properly. If I'm standing in the corner, what about the rest of the students who are not listening to me properly? So that's why you have to understand the phonetics involved over here. It doesn't mean that only one who is teaching English phonetics helps him or her. No, not at all. It is a subject of each and every person. Even somebody else who is not enrolled in MA or BS program in English language. If somebody is listening to me, maybe a student of chemistry or physics, whatsoever he or she is doing, even he should be knowing, all right, somebody is talking to me and somebody is telling me about the production of speech sounds. And what happens in fact, because I told you it is energy. It is energy. So this is what acoustic analysis of our speech sound is. And then, depending on the consistency of the given medium, the sounds move at different speeds and have varying intensities. What about the sound of the person who is very angry? And do you think when he's shouting, the intensity is the same with the speaker who is speaking so calmly? No, absolutely not. There is a difference. Always remember. Depending upon the intensities, right? Sometimes speed, you might have seen there are very speedy speakers. And what happens when they are speaking speed? Nobody can understand them. In the classroom, remember, it should not happen, my dear ones. To be very fast is not the requirement. To be understandable is the requirement. At this time, what we need, of course, we are trying to understand. If you become a smart student after having understood what is the concept or what is phonetics in fact, I'm sure that you can understand the personalities of the people easily through communication, the time he or she is producing some sort of speech sounds. And then the line further says, this is why we sound differently when we speak under normal circumstances from when we try to talk underwater, and also why it is completely impossible for speech sounds to travel through a vacuum. What happens? Our speech varies. Sometimes it is because of certain intensities what happens that we become different speakers, right? Depending upon the circumstances. Sometimes you are stressed, and when you are talking, what happens, the people can easily judge you that your speech is not connected. Disturbed speech. Why? Because you are not properly producing the sounds. That's very important to understand for us at this time as a student of phonetics and phonology, that there are certain circumstances. Okay? If you are in a stressful situation, how would you respond? Same is the case in the classroom when we are having a face-to-face interaction. Sometimes it is possible your teacher is under stress, that he or she is not focusing what he really wants or she really wants to focus on. And you can understand, or like there is something going on in the mind of the instructor. Maybe he is not speaking so loudly or she is not speaking so loudly. Maybe he is not connecting or not combining the sounds properly, the sounds he or she is to produce. That's why it's very important to understand the acoustic nature of phonetics. Okay? By the way, I want to share one thing. What happens, for example, you are just swimming and you are under the water. Can you speak? You cannot speak, isn't it? If you try to speak, what happens? Nobody can listen to you. Why? The answer is here. Speech sounds propagate in the shape of waves. What about the waves when we are speaking? For example, we are in the water and there is a vacuum. Right? What happens? Now, I want to understand the properties, the physical properties in a different way now. Give me the answer. If you're sitting on the bank of a small lake and you throw a small pebble in the water, what happens? And I'm sure that when you were a little boy or a girl, you used to do a lot with your parents, isn't it? So you find certain, after throwing the pebble or the stone inside the water, some ripples are there in the shapes of waves, isn't it? If there is a small pebble, it's okay. The ripples will not be strong. They will not be high. What if you throw a big stone in the water? You will be having high waves, isn't it? And they can travel fast. Same is the case with the production of speech sounds, my dear. It's very important. If I am in the class of 50 or 40, how much decibel, how much pitch I need to have? You might have seen certain people shout when you're just talking to a person who's sitting with you but having 3 to 4 feet distance, and if he or she is just speaking so loud, you say, come on, don't shout. You're shouting. It is possible that it is natural to him or her. It is possible that he is angry. It's possible that he or she is facing some other circumstances. So that's why it's very important to understand this line. May I read it for you? Again, speech sounds propagate in the shape of waves, similar to the ripples that arise when we throw an object such as stone into the water. And this is what I was telling you. Right? So it helps you to understand the second statement, and that is the degree of displacement corresponds to the height. Now, amplitude. Do you understand now amplitude? The degree of displacement corresponds to the height of the wave. Amplitude in sound waves corresponds to intensity measured in decibel. This is what I was saying. Decibel stands as dB. High pitch for short, which in turn corresponds to a subjective impression of loudness. Now you understand what is amplitude. I'm sure that that you read about this, but it's especially when you're just going to have some sort of music deck, right? There is a manual, and the manual, it is written there. But now you understand, when we are speaking, of course, we are also applying physics. It talks about the degree of displacement corresponds to the height of the wave when we speak. All right? It is primarily concerned with the loudness of the speech sounds. At this time, for example, I don't need to shout because I'm sitting in front of computer. Or maybe I have got 1 to 2 feet distance. But if I have, for example, 40 students or 50 students in front of me, do you think the decibel pitch I need, the same one which I'm using here? No, absolutely not. I have to shift. Say, for example, if I have 30 decibel pitch at the moment, I have to shift it to either 70 or 100 or something like that, or maybe 150, depending upon the nature of audience, what is the distance I have. Because the distance, if measured, for example, in between the instructor and the student, the first row of the student is different. While we compare the distance between the last row of the students and the instructor. I'm using the word instructor again and again. I'm sorry for that, but I always feel that I'm the facilitator of learning. Yes, exactly, professionally I have to say instructor, but remember, morally and principally, I always believe that the teachers are the facilitators of learning, and I'm trying to facilitate learning. Now, I'm giving you certain examples because you have had experience of your classes from school days to university till semester number 1, which you have passed now. Now by this time you're in the semester 2, and I'm sure that after completing this semester, and definitely this phonetics and phonology course, you will be in a better position in the coming days when you shall be in the third semester to understand, all right, what is the articulate nature, what is the acoustic nature, and definitely since you're the audience, and at times you're the audience but other times you become the speaker, so what is the auditory world based on articulatory phonetics and acoustic phonetics, then definitely you can understand now whether I am listening the proper sounds or not. After developing understanding, you must remember one thing, that in acoustic phonetics we describe the physical properties of the stream of sound that issues forth from the mouth of a speaker. Alright? While understanding this, we can describe the physical properties of what? The stream of sound. But remember, this stream of sound, it is always issued from the mouth of the speaker. That's very important to understand, because complex sound waves produced in speech can be analyzed into their components, frequencies, and relative amplitudes. As I've tried to make you understand what is amplitude, what is the frequency, by giving you a very simple example. But most importantly, acoustic phonetics has achieved a good deal of success in matters of the study of the sound of vowels. Now this is what the new statement which is coming before us. The success rate is high when we talk about the vowel sounds, but regarding consonants, it has not reached final conclusion. Now I want you to stop here. Now if you go to London, and if you come across the people living in London, especially those known as Cockney people, very interestingly, there are certain sounds they just substitute. For example, there is a sound f. F. That is a labiodental sound. And then there is a sound th. That is called dental sound. It is possible you find a speaker speaking like this. Now listen to me carefully. I think I'll throw a party on Thursday. I think I'll throw a party on Thursday. Now it is possible that when I'm listening to him or her, what I am understanding, auditory phonetics, that he or she is saying, I think I will throw a party on Thursday. No, I am not listening this, because I'm listening, I think I'll throw a party on Thursday. Now what happens in fact? The sound th is converted or substituted with f sound. In fact, he or she is saying, I think I'll throw a party on Thursday. But what happens, since it is very much there, they convert th sound into f sound. And that's why this sentence is coming to us like this. I think I'll throw a party on Thursday. So that's why it's very important. We cannot make that English as model. It is not possible for us to understand that English. For example, if somebody who's your instructor and he's a Cockney guy, if he or she is talking to you and giving you instruction regarding phonetics and phonology, the things become difficult for us. That's why this is not the model that is in the books and the textbooks worldwide. That could be one of the dialects of English in England, but that cannot be called model. What do you think about Punjabi, your own language, for example? Do you think the Punjabi which is spoken in Lahore is spoken in Gujranwala, or maybe in Faisalabad, or maybe in Jhang, or maybe in Mianwali? No, it is not. Even then we call this as Punjabi. There are certain dialects available. But remember, we have to follow the model which is in the dictionary or in the books, authentic books. So that's why it is important when we talk about acoustic phonetics, never forget that we are not talking about some dialects of English. We are talking about the model language. So this acoustic phonetics definitely has reached a wonderful pedestal, so far as this line tells us that so far as the world of vowels is concerned. But so far as the consonants, I have given you the example of the substitution of th sound, which is a dental sound, into or with f sound, which is a labiodental sound. Dear students, after talking about acoustic phonetics, this is the time to talk about articulatory phonetics. Let me read this line for you. It is the study of movement of the speech organs in the articulation of speech. It is the study of what? A movement of the speech organs in the articulation of speech. Articulation of speech, movement of what? Speech organs. This is what I have been telling you time and again. And I presented before you some slides with a request that what you need to do is that you have to master those diagrams. The basic diagram is very important because in the coming days you will be having many more slides showing different diagrams, and it is the time that you must try to recall whenever I ask you please to the first diagram which I presented before you. So what it is written over here, it is a study of movement of the speech organs in the articulation of speech. In fact, we are trying to study what the speech organs, in fact. We try to understand the movement of the speech organs whenever we speak or whenever we are producing even a single sound. For example, speech is produced by the movement of organs of speech like lungs, larynx, soft palate, tongue, teeth and lips. Do you remember the slide containing all these speech organs? But at the same time, some other terms you also came across, and I requested you that you must try to understand them. For your understanding's sake, I requested you have to read them out, record your voice. Now these are the speech organs. I'm not saying these are the only speech organs, but what happens for the example's sake, I'm presenting before you lungs, larynx, soft palate, tongue, teeth and lips. These are the speech organs like, such as, you can say such as. This is not the entire of speech organs, remember. And then it recognizes that speech is produced by some kind of sound making apparatus. Now I want you to stop over here. First time we are coming across something new, that is sound making apparatus. We have never talked about this before. That means we are now learning about something. And what is that something? That is a kind of sound making apparatus. I hope you remember when you were a matric student, intermediate students, what happened to you? You had to go to the laboratory to do some experiments. Do you remember? And I expect that you also remember that different types of apparatus was required for different types of experiments. Okay, you can recall. That's good. Now we are engaged to understand, all right, there is some sort of sound making apparatus. That means that is inside human body. Yes, exactly, it is. It recognizes what articulatory phonetics recognizes, that speech is produced by some kind of sound making apparatus inside the human body. And that specific sound may be related to specific movement of the apparatus. Yes, absolutely right. As I've already told you, if I'm producing per sound and th sound, the apparatus movement is different when I'm speaking or producing per sound. But when I am producing the sound or th sound, the movement of the apparatus is different. Absolutely different. Are you getting my point? Further, the knowledge of the organs of speech, their relation to each other, and the way in which they are used while speaking provides a sound basis of the classification of sound of human languages. Something new again. Again, something new in this slide, that is the classification of sound of human languages. That means, first of all, we have to understand the sound making apparatus and then whatever the sounds that apparatus generates or makes, we can classify them. So this is the area of articulatory phonetics we must try to understand, because in the coming days we have to classify the entire sounds, but specifically we shall be picking up English sounds. Are you getting my point? So it also provides a sound basis of the classification of sound of human languages. Okay? My dear students, after understanding acoustic phonetics separately and articulatory phonetics, the time has come to understand auditory phonetics. It is the study of hearing and the perception of speech sounds. It is the study of hearing and the perception of speech sounds. It studies different auditory impression of quality, pitch, and loudness of sounds. Quality, pitch, and loudness of sounds. Now these are the areas of auditory phonetics you must remember. It tells us something about the sound we produce, what is the quality, what is the pitch of that sound, and how much loudness is there. Is it clear? And at the same time, phonetics can be regarded as being made of two main branches. One is the articulatory, the other one is the acoustics. To understand auditory phonetics, what we need to understand is that what is our knowledge about articulatory phonetics? How do we produce sounds? And then acoustic phonetics, what kind of sounds we produce? Because whatever we do, whatever we produce, right, we must be knowing what is the way to produce that sound. And when sound is produced, remember, somebody who is in fact trying to understand the sounds, how he would or she would understand? Through quality, pitch, and loudness of sounds. Okay? Now I want you to focus on this slide. You must remember all these speech organs to understand acoustic, articulatory, and auditory phonetics. So please give a couple of minutes to this particular slide, stay and try to understand them and what is their position in this diagram. Yes, what is their position in this diagram? It's very important to remember them, okay? Starting from nasal cavity to larynx and of course epiglottis. If you need further explanation, you can refer to this particular slide. Of course, this diagram in fact presents all the speech organs in a different way. You can see, you can remember, you can understand all these speech organs from top to bottom, from nasal cavity to windpipe and esophagus. You can remember, you can store in your mind what is the position of each and every speech organ in our mouth. My dear students, after having detailed analysis of all the branches of phonetics, for example, acoustics, articulatory, and auditory, I think these are the points we must remember all the time. Number one, phonetics is also connected with many other sciences. Acoustic phonetics is connected with physics and mathematics. Articulatory phonetics is connected with physiology, anatomy, and anthropology. As I had a talk with you people, and I said, of course, they have got the link with phonetics. All these branches have got the link with phonetics, right? And then further, historical phonetics is connected with general history of the people whose language is studied. If you are studying, for example, the language of 4,000 years back nation, right? Of course, historical phonetics is to be considered at that time. And then it is also connected with an archaeology. Okay, archaeology. Archaeology is one of the subjects, in fact, that is also contributing to understand phonetics. Then phonology is connected with communication information theory, mathematics, and statistics. So after having read these two statements, it's very important to understand One point, that we cannot separate phonetics and phonology from the rest of the disciplines. As I told you earlier, and I think so in the first session I had a talk with you people about these things, that physiology is playing role, physics is playing role, anatomy is playing role. At the same time, today we have learned, all right, there is one other aspect, that is history or historical phonetics, so maybe archaeology, right? So all the branches of learning work together in collaboration. Now it is just like that. For example, when I picked up this course, during the first session I said, all right, definitely we are talking virtually, but assume that we are talking not virtually, but we are sitting in front of each other, we are trying to understand each other. Now this is what I do, and to be very honest and fair, let me tell you, when I'm talking, for example, not in front of my computer, but my laptop, but I feel that, okay, I'm just talking to my students. That's why I try to speak naturally the way I am speaking in the classroom, so that there is some sort of understanding and coordination. Because what we're going to do, we are going to bring learning in the classroom through online. And how it is possible, the way other branches of learning are helping phonetics and phonology, or they are helping us, in fact, to understand phonetics and phonology. So is the case with us. All right, now you understand that how physiology is working, or anatomy or physics, they are working, they are playing their role, they are assisting us to understand phonetics and phonology. Now, after having talked a lot, after detailed analysis and discussion, the point arises, or the question arises, how do we identify speech sounds? If there is a question on you that how do we identify speech sound, what could be the answer? If there is a question like that, this could be the possible answer. This could be the possible answer. And what is that? The science of phonetics aims to describe all the sounds of all the world's languages. So this is what I wanted to remember, that when you talk about phonetics, we're talking about any language. But for your convenience sake, time and again I try to refer to English, so that we may be able to understand, since we already know about English language. And 4 things are very important to remember. 1, acoustic phonetics. Remember, that focuses on the physical properties of the sounds of language. 2, auditory phonetics focuses on how listeners perceive the sounds of language. 3, articulatory phonetics focuses on how the vocal tract produces the sounds of language. And 4, functional phonetics focuses on the linguistic use of the language, whatever the language it is, or we are speaking, okay, or we are producing the sound of language. So these are the 4 broad areas. Of course, this is the answer if somebody is putting you the question that how do we identify speech sounds, so you can answer like that according to my point of view. Before we end our today's session, this is what I always told you, and I shall keep on telling you, the self-assessment component of each and every session. It's very important that whatever we started, whenever we start in the beginning, all the topics are there, we shall be discussing these topics in this session. Remember, the self-assessment is primarily based on the topics we have had discussion on. And today's self-assessment area is that I want you to write in detail on the branches of phonetics with examples where necessary. I tried my level best to provide you the details of all the branches of phonetics, especially acoustics, articulatory and auditory phonetics. At the same time, we also talked about the functional phonetics, definitely that is the linguistic use of the language that makes it functional. I hope that when you're going to write down, you will consult this session again, and you will definitely go for the sport material if it is with you, right? And then please start writing the answer, and afterwards you have to put the answer in the folder I requested you to make. That is the very important folder. So I hope that you might have enjoyed today's session, and we shall talk more and more in the coming sessions. So from my side, goodbye and good luck. Stay blessed.